The Book of Five Rings is a timeless manual on strategy, combat, and self-discipline, written by the legendary Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi in the 17th century. Structured around five symbolic rings or elements, earth, water, fire, wind, and void, the book offers more than just sword-fighting techniques. It presents a profound philosophy of life and mastery. Musashi uses these elemental metaphors to guide readers through principles of combat strategy, psychological warfare, timing, adaptability, and inner clarity. Though rooted in martial arts, the lessons extend far beyond the battlefield, influencing business, leadership, and personal growth even in the modern world. Miyamoto Musashi was a masterless samurai, or ronin, famed for his unmatched skill with the sword and an undefeated record in over 60 duels. Born in 1584 during Japan's feudal era, Musashi became a living legend through both his martial prowess and his unconventional lifestyle. He rejected fame, comfort, and social status in favor of a solitary path of discipline and spiritual training. Musashi was also a skilled artist, calligrapher, and philosopher. In the final years of his life, he retired to a cave called Ri-Gando, where he meditated and wrote the Book of Five Rings, distilling a lifetime of warrior wisdom into a concise and poetic work that continues to inspire warriors, entrepreneurs, and seekers of mastery around the world. The Earth Book. In the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi begins with the Earth Book, which lays the foundation for all that follows. This section is primarily about grounding understanding the principles, mindset, and broad view of strategy. Musashi explains that the way of the warrior is not just about technical skills, but a way of life that must be practiced with dedication, self-discipline, and full comprehension. He frames swordsmanship as a metaphor for all forms of conflict, be it on the battlefield, in business, or in daily life. To master the art of strategy, one must first become familiar with the concept of strategy itself and be committed to learning through repetition, observation, and experience. Musashi opens by describing the idea of ways, the way of the carpenter, the farmer, the merchant, and the warrior. Every profession has its path, and the warrior's way is the path of strategy. Just as a carpenter learns his tools and how to build according to the conditions of the wood and the desired result, a warrior must learn to understand conditions, timing, and application of technique. The comparison is deliberate. Mastery in any field requires awareness, adaptability, and rigorous practice. Strategy is not just reacting to the enemy. It's a way of perceiving the world where everything becomes a part of your training. He emphasizes the importance of knowing both your own skills and those of your opponent. The strategist must cultivate objectivity, seeing everything clearly and without bias. Musashi stresses that people often fail because they focus on superficial appearances, decorative flourishes, flashy moves, rather than mastering the basics. He warns against becoming attached to a single technique or style, arguing that such rigidity makes a person predictable and vulnerable. A key lesson in the Earth Book is the idea of learning through direct experience. Musashi distrusts learning that is overly intellectual or theoretical. He insists that understanding must be grounded in physical practice, repetition, and actual encounters. You must test and temper your techniques in real conditions, not in idealized or imagined scenarios. Through this process, you gain what he calls seeing, or discernment, a deep, intuitive grasp of situations as they unfold. Musashi also lays out the basic principles of his style, which he calls two heavens as one. This style uses two swords, the long sword, katana, and the short sword, wakizashi, together in combat. At the time, most samurai trained to fight with only one sword at a time. Musashi's innovation was to use both weapons simultaneously, allowing for more flexible and dynamic movement. He believed that using both swords reflected a deeper balance between power and control, offense and defense. The practice also trained the body to move in a more balanced way and gave the warrior more options in the midst of a fight. In his view, strategy has to be based on reality, not ideals. You don't cling to theory, you adjust to the field. Strategy is about seeing things as they are and acting with clarity. He discusses stance, but not just in the physical sense. There's physical stance, how you hold your body and weapons, but also mental stance, how you orient your mind, your timing, your readiness to act or adapt. He describes several standard stances with the sword, but he discourages reliance on any one. Instead, he advises the warrior to train in all stances and to be ready to shift as needed. Stance should fit the moment, not personal preference. Musashi emphasizes the importance of the big picture. He warns against focusing only on the opponent's blade or hands. Instead, a warrior must perceive the entire field, the rhythm of movement, the subtle signs of an enemy's intention. To win in battle or in life, you must be able to see clearly, without emotional fog, and make decisions quickly and correctly. One must learn to judge distance, timing, and opportunity as second nature. These abilities are developed not through quick learning, but through a lifelong path of awareness and self-refinement. The Earth Book ends with the idea that the way of strategy is a path of constant discipline. Mastery requires effort beyond what others are willing to do. You must practice even in discomfort. You must observe your mistakes, correct them, and continue training regardless of praise or recognition. The true warrior, Musashi says, is one who continues to improve even in solitude, who sharpens his perception in daily life, and who sees each action as an opportunity to train the mind and the body. Musashi is not interested in philosophy for its own sake, nor in perfection that exists only in theory. His world is grounded in practicality and function. The strategy he speaks of is as applicable to war as it is to negotiation, leadership, or self-mastery. The Earth Book plants the seed of this insight. Strategy is everywhere, and the warrior sees with a wide, unwavering eye. In the Water Book, Musashi shifts from foundational principles to a deeper, more fluid explanation of combat and strategy. Water, as a symbol, represents adaptability, clarity, and flow qualities essential to the strategist. This section emphasizes the importance of adjusting to circumstances, learning techniques, and refining one's mental and physical movement. If the Earth Book was about grounding, the Water Book is about shaping, flowing, and reacting with precision. Musashi opens by stating that to understand strategy, you must understand yourself and your opponent with equal clarity. You must be like water, taking the shape of the container or the battlefield. Flexibility is not weakness. It is the ability to respond without hesitation or rigidity. The warrior must move fluidly between offensive and defensive positions, changing rhythm, pace, and tactics without losing control or awareness. Musashi calls this the ability to harmonize with the enemy's movements while keeping the initiative. He then discusses the proper use and timing of the long sword. Many warriors, Musashi claims, focus too much on style or appearances. They become obsessed with form and elegance, which often leads to ineffective combat. In contrast, Musashi advocates for simplicity and effectiveness. The long sword should be used with intention, not flourish. Its purpose is to control and defeat the enemy, not to entertain or impress. He describes how different grips, angles, and cuts should be applied depending on the distance and timing. What matters most is the ability to execute techniques at the right moment with decisiveness and clarity. Musashi outlines several core techniques, including cutting, striking, thrusting, and the use of both swords simultaneously. But rather than offering step-by-step instructions, he describes principles behind each movement. For instance, when striking, the swordsman should aim not just to cut the enemy's body, but to destroy their spirit, to dominate their rhythm and control their mind. A strong attack should shatter the enemy's confidence. Musashi insists that spirit and physical action must be united. A weak spirit, even with good technique, will result in failure. Timing is a major theme in the Water Book. Musashi introduces the concept of timing in strategy, which goes beyond merely reacting fast. Good timing means knowing when to act, when to wait, when to press, and when to feint. It means reading the opponent's intentions and interrupting their rhythm at precisely the right instant. Timing must be practiced constantly until it becomes intuitive. Musashi argues that a warrior must develop a feel for timing not just in battle, but in life, knowing when to speak, when to hold back, when to advance, and when to retreat. He also elaborates on the use of rhythm. Every opponent has a rhythm, a pattern of movement, breath, and emotion. The skilled strategist learns to detect and manipulate this rhythm. Sometimes you match it to lull the opponent into comfort, then break it to confuse or dominate. Sometimes you disrupt their rhythm early to unbalance them before they can build momentum. Controlling rhythm is, for Musashi, a form of psychological warfare. If you can make your opponent fight on your rhythm, you are already winning. Musashi describes several guard positions, stances, but again insists that no stance is superior. Each one has its purpose, but a true strategist is not bound by any one form. For example, he describes the middle stance, where the sword is held in front of the body, offering balance between offense and defense. But he quickly cautions the reader not to become attached to this or any other stance. The key is to understand the purpose behind each position and use it when appropriate. Rigid attachment is weakness. Adaptability is strength. The concept of initiative is another key idea. Musashi uses the term attacking the enemy's spirit to describe the act of taking initiative. This doesn't necessarily mean striking first. It means seizing the psychological and tactical momentum. To do this, one must observe the enemy closely, understand their behavior, and respond with decisive, preemptive action. Whether by stepping forward aggressively, feinting, or baiting the opponent into a mistake, the warrior must always aim to control the battle. Musashi then outlines several techniques designed to unsettle or confuse opponents. One is pressing down the enemy's sword, where the warrior uses their blade or body to suppress the opponent's movement and force them into an awkward position. Another is body displacing, a method of shifting your position quickly to the side or forward, surprising the enemy and opening up angles of attack. These maneuvers are not about brute strength, but about sharp awareness, subtle movement, and disrupting the enemy's rhythm and balance. He emphasizes again that training must be continuous and realistic. Practicing techniques in a dojo is not enough. A true strategist brings these principles into every part of life, sharpening perception, spirit, and decisiveness in all situations. The warrior's focus is not only on defeating enemies, but on defeating delusion, seeing clearly, acting without hesitation, and maintaining composure no matter the circumstance. Musashi's writing in the Water Book also touches on the inner life of the warrior. He describes the need to remain emotionally calm but mentally alert. Anxiety, anger, or pride can cloud judgment and weaken response. The warrior must practice no-mindedness, a state where the mind is free from distraction and open to what is happening in the moment. This doesn't mean emptiness, but heightened awareness. The more clearly you see the opponent, the less power they have over you. To conclude the Water Book, Musashi reminds the reader that the path of strategy is not mastered quickly. It is not about collecting techniques, but refining perception. To see the way is to go beyond surface-level forms and learn to read deeper patterns of movement, of intention, of opportunity. Just as water flows into the shape of its container, the strategist must flow into the shape of the situation, always present, always ready to adapt and strike with perfect timing. In the Fire Book, Miyamoto Musashi dives into the essence of direct combat, while the Earth and Water books laid out the philosophical and strategic foundations. The Fire Book is about the heat of battle confrontation, engagement, and execution under pressure. Fire symbolizes intensity, aggression, and clarity in action. This section discusses how to overwhelm the opponent, dominate the fight, and maintain initiative through tactical mastery. Musashi begins by emphasizing that strategy must be applied in real conflict. This isn't theory or rehearsal. It's about fighting to win. Fire means urgency, force, and decisiveness. In combat, hesitation or indecision can be fatal. Therefore, Musashi urges warriors to cultivate an aggressive mindset, not reckless or wild, but bold and unflinching. One must enter the fight with spirit fully committed, vision fully open, and technique fully prepared. He introduces the concept of battlefield strategy, which involves understanding the layout of the terrain, the opponent's condition, and your own strengths. A good strategist evaluates all conditions before the fight and uses them to advantage. This includes manipulating environment, movement, and timing to steer the enemy into a disadvantage. Musashi compares this to drawing a bow, not simply aiming, but adjusting for distance, wind, and tension. The act must be focused and fluid, without hesitation. A key lesson in the Fire Book is the importance of initiative. To control the opponent, you must dictate the flow of the fight. Musashi speaks of attacking while they are about to attack, seizing the moment just before the enemy moves. This psychological dominance is crucial. If you can read the opponent and act before they do, you've already shifted the balance in your favor. This requires what he calls preemptive perception, the ability to intuit their intention through posture, gaze, rhythm, and subtle changes in body tension. Musashi outlines several combat tactics and mental approaches that aim to break the enemy's spirit and rhythm. One technique he emphasizes is pressing attack, where the warrior continues to strike or advance, denying the enemy time to reset or gather themselves. This tactic creates overwhelming pressure, forcing the opponent into defensive reactions and mistakes. Musashi makes clear that this pressure must be sustained intelligently, not blindly flailing, but observing and adapting within the attack. You press with spirit and awareness, maintaining dominance without becoming predictable. Another tactic is hit and close in, the idea of striking and moving forward into the enemy's space, denying them room to maneuver. This suppresses their ability to counterattack and puts them on the back foot. The fire of your movement burns away their options. Musashi explains that the warrior must never retreat without reason. Movement should be assertive and purposeful. Even when stepping back, it should be to set up a better position or bait the enemy, not out of fear or uncertainty. The Fire Book also explores feints and deception. Musashi advises creating openings that aren't real, inviting the enemy to attack where you are strong, or faking weakness to draw them in. Once they commit, you strike with precision. These deceptions should be natural and fluid, not overcomplicated. The goal is to manipulate their judgment. If the enemy fights based on false assumptions, they will leave themselves open to defeat. Musashi also discusses the use of gaze and intention. He says never to fix your gaze on the enemy's sword or face. Instead, take in the whole body, see broadly, not narrowly. Narrow focus leads to tunnel vision, which makes you predictable and reactive. Seeing broadly allows you to catch subtle shifts in balance, stance, or intent. At the same time, Musashi encourages controlling your own gaze. A calm, unreadable presence unsettles the opponent. Your mind should be steady, your intention clear, but your appearance neutral. One of the most interesting aspects of the Fire Book is the emphasis on mental dominance. Musashi argues that defeating the enemy mentally is just as important as physically. A warrior must project confidence and mastery. If the enemy senses hesitation or doubt, they gain strength. But if you appear composed, balanced, and powerful, they will often falter. Musashi describes attacking the mind using rhythm, pressure, posture, and unpredictability to confuse or break the opponent's will before the fight is even decided by blade. Musashi also warns against excessive reliance on any one strategy or technique. A warrior must remain unpredictable. Using the same tactic repeatedly makes you easy to counter. The true strategist mixes rhythm, changes timing, adjusts distance, and varies technique to keep the enemy guessing. The fire of your strategy is not just heat, it is transformation, the constant reshaping of your actions to suit the situation. Another key teaching is crossing at a ford, which is Musashi's metaphor for seizing the critical moment. In battle, there is often a brief window where the opponent is exposed or uncertain. A true warrior must recognize that moment and move without hesitation. Like crossing a narrow ford in a river, you must go all the way across without delay, or you risk being swept away. Musashi stresses that these moments appear suddenly and disappear quickly. If you are not ready, you miss them. He also introduces the idea of using the edge of the enemy's sword. This means taking advantage of the opponent's movement or attack, using their energy against them. Instead of meeting force with force, you deflect, redirect, or move into the opening they create. This is a principle of economy winning, not by overpowering, but by seeing more clearly and acting more decisively. Timing, again, is everything. If you move too early or too late, you lose the advantage. In the Fire book, Musashi also describes his distaste for elaborate or showy techniques. He critiques schools that focus on aesthetic movements or ornamental swordplay. In real combat, beauty has no use. What matters is simplicity, directness, and effectiveness. This ruthless practicality defines his entire philosophy. The warrior's purpose is to win. Everything else is secondary. The Fire book closes with the idea that fighting is an extension of one's perception. If your vision is clear, your actions will be accurate. If your spirit is calm, your rhythm will dominate. If your technique is adaptable, your enemy cannot predict you. Musashi teaches that fire is not about blind aggression. It is about focused energy, clarity under pressure, and relentless execution of strategy. In this way, the fire of combat becomes a refining force one that reveals whether the warrior has truly mastered the way. In the Wind book, Miyamoto Musashi shifts from discussing his own strategy to analyzing and critiquing the styles and teachings of other martial traditions. The term wind refers to the styles, philosophies, and methods of other schools, and this section is meant to contrast their approaches with his own. Musashi is critical of many popular schools of the time, arguing that they often fall into the traps of superficiality, excessive formality, and impracticality. His goal is to encourage the reader to question tradition, see through illusion, and focus on effectiveness above all. Musashi begins by acknowledging that there are many martial schools, each with their own history, stances, and technical preferences. While some of these traditions emphasize elegance, speed, or highly choreographed forms, Musashi argues that many have strayed from the true essence of strategy. He believes that too much emphasis on appearances and ritual can blind a warrior to the realities of combat. Techniques that are beautiful or elaborate might impress in a demonstration, but they fail under real pressure. His central critique is that many styles focus on form over function. He criticizes schools that rely heavily on fixed stances or rigid patterns of movement. In his view, any technique that cannot be adapted fluidly to different circumstances is of limited use. Musashi again emphasizes that no stance should be regarded as inherently superior. A stance is just a temporary position, a response to a specific moment. To rely on one stance for all situations is to invite defeat. True strategy requires the ability to shift posture, intention, and rhythm according to the demands of the situation. The Wind book also critiques the tendency of other schools to focus excessively on distance and timing in a mechanical way. Musashi agrees that distance and timing are crucial, but he argues they must be understood through feeling, not just memorization. A warrior must develop an intuitive sense for these elements, what he calls natural timing. Rigid techniques that rely on rehearsed timing or pre-measured distance are likely to fail in the fluid, unpredictable space of real combat. He warns that many schools teach fixed, winning techniques that are supposed to guarantee success if followed correctly. Musashi believes this is a dangerous illusion. There is no such thing as a perfect technique. Victory comes from perception, adaptability, and mental presence. A move that works in one context may fail in another. Instead of memorizing solutions, the strategist must cultivate flexible principles and a calm, discerning mind. Musashi critiques the showmanship often associated with some schools. Demonstrations of speed, power, or control might look impressive, but they do not reflect the unpredictability of real fighting. He sees this focus on spectacle as misleading, both for students and instructors. It leads to an overconfidence in moves that have never been tested in real battle. For Musashi, strategy must be forged in the crucible of real conflict. He reminds the reader that many martial artists have died because they relied on flashy techniques that failed them when it mattered most. A core idea in the Wind Book is independence of thought. Musashi urges warriors to go beyond the boundaries of any one style or school. He warns against becoming trapped by tradition or dogma. True strategy is not about loyalty to a system. It's about winning with clarity and precision. The warrior must always question what they've been taught, test it in real conditions, and discard anything that proves ineffective. Blind adherence to a tradition is no different than ignorance. He also emphasizes that reading about or watching techniques is not the same as knowing them. Intellectual understanding must be joined with practice and embodiment. Knowledge that is not grounded in the body is unreliable in combat. Musashi urges his readers to test all techniques through direct experience and to trust only what has proven itself repeatedly under pressure. The Wind Book is also about perception, particularly the ability to see through false appearances. Musashi stresses that many martial artists are misled by formality, reputation, or aesthetics. They assume that an instructor who looks elegant or has a respected lineage must possess true skill, but real ability is not always visible from the outside. The strategist must learn to see past surface-level qualities and evaluate techniques and people based on results. This skill, judging by truth, not appearance, is central to Musashi's philosophy. Musashi also critiques the tendency of schools to overspecialize. Some focus only on short-range techniques, others only on long swords or on certain stances. He believes this narrow focus limits the warrior's adaptability. His own style, two heavens as one, advocates the use of both long and short swords simultaneously and promotes fluid movement between techniques. A true strategist, he argues, must be prepared for all situations: close range, long range, multiple opponents, surprise attacks. Specialization creates blind spots. He writes about the danger of teachers who themselves lack true understanding. Some instructors pass on what they learned without ever questioning or testing it. They may teach with confidence, but lack the experience to refine or correct their own errors. Students who study under such teachers may inherit not just their techniques, but their misconceptions. Musashi urges readers to evaluate their instructors carefully and never accept teachings without first putting them to the test. The Wind Book ends by returning to the theme of strategy as a path of self-development. While the critiques are sharp, Musashi's intention is not to attack others, but to push the reader toward a higher level of awareness. He wants the strategist to think independently, to strip away illusions, and to pursue victory with clarity and effectiveness. Style, tradition, and form are not ends in themselves, they are tools, and tools must serve a purpose. If they fail that purpose, they must be discarded. In short, The Wind Book is a call to vigilance against stagnation and illusion. Musashi insists that the way of strategy is a living path. It must evolve, adapt, and be continually tested. To blindly follow others is to risk death. To rely on untested forms is to gamble with your life. The true warrior sees through the wind past the noise of fashion, pride, and pretense, and focuses only on what leads to victory. That clarity is what defines the strategist. The final section of the Book of Five Rings, the Book of the Void, is the most abstract and philosophical. Unlike the other 4 books, which focus on physical combat, tactics, and practical strategy, this one addresses the spiritual and metaphysical dimension of mastery. Musashi uses void to refer to that which is beyond form and experience of clarity and insight that transcends technique, ego, and thought. It is the ultimate state of awareness, where the warrior moves not from conscious deliberation, but from pure intuition and presence. Musashi opens by defining the void as that which has no beginning and no end. It is not emptiness in a nihilistic sense, but rather the absence of illusion. The void is the space of pure potential, where action arises from deep understanding and harmony with reality. In the context of martial arts and strategy, the void represents a level of mastery, where techniques no longer need to be consciously recalled. They simply happen, without interference from overthinking or attachment to form. He explains that the void is the source of all techniques and strategies, but it itself cannot be seen or grasped. When the warrior reaches this state, there is no longer a distinction between the self and the action. The sword moves as an extension of the body moves as an extension of the spirit, and the spirit is in harmony with the rhythm of the world. This is the highest form of strategy, not a mechanical mastery of techniques, but a transcendent unity with the moment. Musashi emphasizes that to reach this level, the warrior must go through all the earlier stages, grounding in fundamentals, earth, adaptability, water, decisive combat, fire, and discernment of style, wind. The void is not a shortcut. It is the culmination of deep practice and reflection. Only by mastering the visible forms can one begin to understand the invisible. When attachment to technique falls away, what remains is pure strategy action without hesitation, judgment without bias, victory without ego. He warns against misunderstanding the void. It is not ignorance, confusion, or passivity. Rather, it is awareness that sees through delusion. Most people are caught in forms, opinions, and dualities, right versus wrong, self versus other, victory versus defeat. But the strategist who enters the void sees beyond these opposites. This insight allows for calmness in chaos, clarity in conflict, and action without fear. Musashi suggests that this is not something that can be learned from books. It must be experienced directly through relentless training and inward stillness. The void is also where the strategist transcends fear. Fear arises from the self-fear of death, fear of failure, fear of being exposed or defeated. But in the void, the self is no longer a barrier. There is only the moment and the necessity of action. When a warrior moves from this place, their movements are effortless and unforced. There is no longer resistance, only the expression of what must be done. This is where Musashi's concept of winning without fighting takes root, not in the sense of avoiding battle, but in acting with such precision and insight that struggle is dissolved. He reinforces that the void cannot be taught, only pointed toward. It is not something that comes early in the path, but is revealed only through the fusion of body, mind, and experience. To reach the void, the strategist must have no attachment to winning or losing, to life or death. They act because it is necessary, not because it serves their ego. This state allows for freedom from hesitation. Musashi calls it the true essence of the way. The Book of the Void also touches on the nature of reality itself. Musashi suggests that most people live in illusion-chasing appearances, clinging to forms and acting from fear or pride. The way of strategy is a method for cutting through those illusions. Every strike, every movement, every observation is a step toward understanding how things really are. This understanding is not academic, it is embodied. The warrior becomes a person who sees clearly, lives simply, and acts with certainty. Musashi's final words in the Void Book and in the entire Book of Five Rings reflect the culmination of his life's experience. He says that knowing the way of strategy deeply leads to knowing the ways of all things. The principles that govern sword fighting are the same that govern leadership, commerce, politics, and personal conduct. The strategist's goal is not simply to win fights, but to live wisely and effectively in all things. When this insight is complete, the strategist becomes like the void, formless, adaptable, and indestructible. Thus, the void is not an end, but a way of being. It is the space from which true mastery arises. The path to it requires relentless effort, brutal honesty, and the courage to face oneself completely. But when attained, it allows for action that is free from doubt and presence that is untouched by circumstance. For Musashi, this is the highest level of the way, the strategist who becomes no one, bound by nothing, and therefore capable of anything. Thanks for listening to today's summary on the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. If you found value in these timeless teachings on strategy and self-mastery, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Mindful Reads for more deep dive summaries of powerful books that expand your thinking and sharpen your mind.